Hello everybody, welcome back to another ASMR video where today I'm going to be going back to the 2022 Senate for the United States, and this time I'm going to be talking about retirements because since I've done my last video, there have been more retirements than just I think the original three, which were in actually, I think the last time I did this video, there was only two in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, but since then there's five, and there might be as much as nine, which is something I'm going to be getting into a little bit later. But I thought I'd revisit talking about the 2020 Senate since it's been, I think, like 2 months. Oh, that's not good. Since it's been about 2 months since I last have, and some things have changed. We've known some candidates a little bit better, so we're just gonna get right into it. So of course we're gonna start by characterizing the Democrat states that are safe. The safe states include California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Hawaii, Illinois, Illinois, Maryland, New York, Connecticut, Vermont, and that's it. So Democrats start with essentially 46 safe seats. None of these states are anywhere near competitive by any margin. So now we have Republican safe states, of course, and that would be Alaska, Utah, Idaho, North and South Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, and I think that's it. No, Kansas. Yeah. So everything else here I'm going to characterize that isn't safe by any sort of degree. So first let's talk about the retirements. So in Pennsylvania, my home state, Pat Toomey is retiring. He will not run in 2022. In North Carolina, Richard Burr, I think is his name. Yeah, Richard Burr is going to be retiring. He is another Republican incumbent. In Alabama, oh no, what was his name? Oh no, Richard Shelby, I think? Richard Shelby, I think that sounds right. I think it's something Shelby, it might not be Richard, I'm not sure. But Alabama is having a retiree. I forget the name of Rob Portman, I think. Yeah, Rob Portman in Ohio is retiring, and Roy Blunt in Missouri is retiring. So we have 5 retirees so far. All of these are Republican incumbents, and it is very likely. It is very likely that this number will grow. Now, there are a few more incumbents that might retire. Now, as far as possible retire, I guess we can make like a little thing. Here we go. We can make a little. I'm not really sure what color he is. We'll just use purple. Sure. So we could have a possible retirement in Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, I think, and Vermont. Oh, that's not Vermont. In Vermont. So overall, this leads us with 9 retirees. I can't name the South Dakota one, but I think there was a Republican senator from South Dakota that said that he might retire. I'm not sure. But anyway, in Iowa, Chuck Grassley might retire, although it's unlikely. In Wisconsin, Ron Johnson has been a very strong component, or a very strong talking point about retiring, I guess you could say, if that makes any sense. And in Vermont, Patrick Leahy, yeah, I think Leahy, could retire. I think he's like Senate pro tempore, I think. But anyway, so all of these are Republican except for Patrick Leahy up in Vermont. And the only one that's Democratic, which is Leahy would just be filled by a Democrat, so it's not like it's competitive. Now, of course, same thing for Republicans, like Alabama and South Dakota are not competitive by any means, and a retiree won't fix that. The last Democratic senator from South Dakota, I actually forget her name. Oh God, actually, I really do forget her name. It's kind of on the tip of my tongue. But they were kicked out in 2014, I think. Maybe 2016. Of course, they aren't really like competitive anymore. That was kind of by the like pre-Obama, during Obama era. But so as far as competitive incumbents, competitive, I mean open seats now. So we're gonna fill in the ones that aren't competitive. We're just gonna fill in South Dakota. We're gonna fill in Alabama. We're gonna fill in the Vermont. So what's left is, if we have any confirmation that Chuck Grassley might resign, which I think he actually said he wouldn't. So I don't think that's really anything to worry about. So I think we can go ahead and just go that back to toss-up. Of course, never count it out. I think there is a lot of things that can go on within about the next year or less. And as a result, don't count out certain people retiring. Chuck Grassley, I think, has been in the Senate since like 1980. He's been in there for a while. He's very old, but I think a poll came out about how he's a bit unpopular. So we'll have to see. But I don't think he's gonna resign. The real thing we should be looking at here is the real thing that we should be looking at here is in Wisconsin. Ron Johnson, a Republican senator, diehard Trump fan, has said some things about the Capitol riots and about the Republican establishment, etc. And he was one of the senators who voted not to confirm the electoral votes. So this is already a relatively unpopular senator, of course. Now, the thing with this is he said he was going to resign back in, I think, 2016, when he got his last term. He said he would not run another term. Since then, he has walked back those statements and said that he might. I think the nearest, or not the nearest, I think the most recent statement he's given is that he does want to retire, but only if it doesn't look like the Democrats are going to keep the House or the Senate. I think he said specifically he doesn't want the Democrats to control the entire government, and if he feels needed to run again, he will. I would say that he's going to retire. I think in every sense that he probably would, but we don't have confirmation yet. So until then, we could just label it as a toss-up. So we have 5 confirmed retirees right now: Pat Toomey, Rob Portman, Roy Blunt, Richard Shelby, Richard Burr. Now, of course, if we can just begin to characterize these, Alabama is safe safe Republican. But these states are all toss-ups. I even consider Missouri a toss-up, and I'll tell you why. So we can just put these back all to toss-ups. So if we go from left to right, we'll go right again from where I believe things stand. We start with Nevada and Arizona. Now, for these two states, oh, I didn't mean to do that. They are pretty similar, I think. I think Nevada is a little bit more, it is a little bit more Democratic. Cortez Masto is up for re-election in Nevada, and Democrats have a really good turnout machine in Nevada. It is extremely likely they'll win this seat. Honestly, I don't even think that, as it stands, Republicans really have a chance. Of course, that can change. We don't really know front runners yet. So if things change, which they always could, and they always do, and they always might, I think a Republican might be able to win here. Probably not by like a little bit more than 1%, but I think realistically, I'm going to label it as lean because we don't know yet, but in my personal opinion, I think that Nevada isn't really that competitive. I think Cortez Masto can win by like 5-6%, which would put it in a likely margin. Now, looking at Arizona, a little bit similar to Nevada. They're both Sunbelt states. Arizona, though, has Mark Kelly fighting for a first full term against whoever. Now, the thing is, both Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema are very not, well, Kyrsten Sinema is a lot more conservative, but I guess Mark Kelly is more moderate. And as a result, he can kind of move over those moderate Republicans a little bit. I think I watched the debates back against Mark Kelly against Martha McSally, and I think the way that he talks, I think he comes across relatively well. The Arizona GOP right now is in a lot of trouble because of breakups, splintering from GOP support and from GOP support and Trump support, etc. So, you look at that and you're like, well, I think if they run a good enough established Republican, they could probably beat Mark Kelly, and I think that's probably true. I think that Republicans, the seat is still in play. I think it's definitely a lot more lean than Nevada is lean, but so I think that Republicans can definitely pick up the seat here if they run somebody good and they really do well. I think the governor, Doug Ducey, I think, said that he would not run, so that's a bit of a blow to the GOP, because that would be somebody I think who could definitely take over Mark Kelly. So next we have, I guess we could do Iowa. So with Iowa, with Chuck Grassley, I think Chuck Grassley, if the polls are correct, I think only 23% of people said that they want to see him run again. Now, of course, let's say in a scenario that it's open. Well, in a scenario like that, you kind of have to go either way because, if there's a really unpopular incumbent, then it would be better to have an open seat, but there's always the incumbency advantage, which is important to talk about. I think Chuck Grassley still has the incumbent advantage in Iowa, and I think a lot of in Iowa matters on how well the Democrats can do in 2 years to flip the Iowa seat. I think as of now, though, it's pretty unlikely. The state has turned pretty far right, and as a result, I don't think that Democrats really have a chance here, but I think a perfect storm, like Chuck Grassley doesn't retire, they get a really moderate Democrat, etc. I think that they can really turn the seat, but as of now, I'm just going to label it lean, likely. We'll have to see how frontrunners do and etc. So, in Missouri, as far as Missouri goes, I think it's kind of similar to Iowa. If you look back at Roy Blunt, and how he only won his seat by like 2%, I think he could kind of read the polls, and that's why he is retiring. Now, as far as like an open seat goes, because that's what we're looking at now, I think Democrats can do very well if they run a very conservative Democrat. Now, like Missouri has always been like sort of in reach for Democrats. I'll always say that. I'll always say like Democrats can come relatively close in the Senate and in presidencies or in presidential elections. Now the Missouri Democratic Party kind of got destroyed. Like in 2020, they didn't do well at all. It was actually a very disappointing showing, especially since Biden didn't even come within a likely margin. I think it was like 15.1%. So you look at this and you're like, well, maybe they can come back. It always, honestly, the status of this kind of depends on um, well the Democrats do in the last few elections, and like things like the American Relief package that Biden sent out. That does really help approval, and that does shift over voters that may have been lost, like white, non-college educated voters, which Democrats lost out big on last election. That's the reason that in Iowa and Ohio they did awful. So I think that a certain very conservative Democrat can do very well in Missouri. It depends on who runs. It depends on the strength of the candidates. But because of that uncertainty factor, I don't want to label it safe. I don't think the margin will be safe either. Oh, that's not good. I don't think the margin will be safe either, so we'll have to see how things play out in Missouri, but I think labeling it safe is a bit foolish. Moving ourselves down to Georgia, Raphael Warnock is going to be fighting for his first full term against somebody, so we don't know yet. Now, Warnock and Ossoff campaigned very heavily on getting those $2,000 stimulus checks. And they did get stimulus checks through, although albeit they weren't $2,000 stimulus checks. So you look at that and you're like, well, okay, he did what he wanted to do. He did what he promised, and he's going to be able to run on whatever else the Democrats managed to do by that time, by 2022. So I think right now the climate, especially in Georgia, because you look at how like the GOP approval is in Georgia, it's very low. No GOP official is really that popular in Georgia right now. So I think right now the climate kind of just naturally favors Democrats. Of course, that could change, and almost certainly will. I think Warnock is actually a relatively weak candidate. He has a lot of things that don't resonate with the American public, such as support for Palestine or support to defund the police, or things he said about, religion, which, albeit may be true, a lot doesn't resonate with a lot with the American public. So, in Georgia, I'm gonna label it lean Democrat. I don't really like. Actually, you know what? I don't like having Georgia and Arizona the same part of Arizona. I'm gonna put Arizona as likely. The things I said about Arizona don't add up to being lean. What I said sounds like likely, so I'm gonna change that to likely to make the lean more consistent. Anyway, like I was saying, I think Warnock can do pretty well here. I mean, he outperformed Jon Ossoff, which is a stronger candidate overall. I think Warnock can pull off a win, but if they run a really good, even a decent Republican, I think that they'll be able to flip the seat, which could spell trouble for the Democrats. Now looking into Florida, I'm kind of tempted, like later on in the election season, I'm probably going to label this safe. I think Marco Rubio, is extremely popular. He's very well known. Everybody loves him. I think the Democrats would need a miracle stronger than that. Would need a miracle stronger than that in Iowa and in Missouri if they want to flip the seat. Marco Rubio is very popular, and unless something unexpected happens, it is likely that the state is going to stay pretty firmly in Marco Rubio's hands, especially since how poorly the Florida... actually, you know what? I'm just going to label it safe now. Whatever. Especially if you look at how poorly the Florida Democratic Party has done. You look at 2016, Donald Trump built his margin. He improved on the margin from 2016. That's awful. That's absolutely terrible. So, you look at that and... So, you look at that and you're like, wow, I don't think the Democrats have a chance here. And yeah, you're kind of right. This, with such a powerful, such a popular incumbent Republican, and with a weak Florida Democratic Party, I don't think that they can really field a candidate that will be able to match Marco Rubio. So as of now, I think it's safe. We'll have to just wait on candidates. Now, in North Carolina, this one, I think, similar to Georgia, I think the political climate is, pretty favored towards Democrats. I think Democrats are going to put a lot of money and time into the state because of, the failure that was 2020. They thought that they were going to win North Carolina, that they were going to flip the Senate seat. That just didn't happen. Neither of that happened. Neither of that happened, so, sorry for the silence. I'm clearing my throat and I don't want you guys to hear that. So you look at like North Carolina and you're like, yeah, they're probably going to field a pretty strong candidate. So, or at least you think they would. See, they were basically cheated. Get it? Cheated out of a 2020 Senate seat because Cal Cunningham, well, he cheated, and it was a big scandal about how he cheated with some girl in California. So, it's very likely that I think Democrats can flip the seat here. Honestly, I'm gonna put it tilt Democrat. I think just barely tilt. I think Democrats have a small upper hand here, and if they don't, I think over time, North Carolina is going to become more Republican or more Democrat, of course, because it's in the Sun Belt. Now we'll have to see. We'll have to see what candidates are going on. An open seat definitely helps the Democrats. We'll see. In Wisconsin, I already talked about Ron Johnson a lot, and because Ron Johnson, if he doesn't retire, I'm gonna label it tilt Democrat. I think Democrats can pull out an edge here against Ron Johnson with how he is a very diehard Trump Republican. They could use the stimulus bill against him. They could use the vote to object against him. So I think Democrats can definitely win here. If Ron Johnson was not, was retiring, I would label this tilt Republican. But I think that Ron Johnson's such a poor candidate that I think he can edge out a victory here. So next we go to Ohio. And Ohio, Rob Portman's resigning. Rob Portman won by like 20%. It was huge. He won with like 60% of the vote. So you look at like Ohio, and you're like, well, it's kind of like Iowa. It went very far to the right. It's pretty unlikely that you can get a Democrat in the office here. Now, the only person that can really do very well is Tim Ryan, and Tim Ryan is almost certainly going to be the nominee. I think he can make this race very competitive. I'm going to label it likely Republican because I believe that Democrats are just out of money here. They don't, not out of luck here. They don't really have a good pro-labor candidate that Sherrod Brown was. Sherrod Brown was like a perfect Democrat here. So you look at that and you're like, well, it's probably unlikely. But as we see later on, Tim Ryan can make the state very, very interesting. So we'll have to wait and see. Next going on is Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is probably one of my hottest takes. I believe that John Fetterman, who has announced his running for the Senate in the state, is going to do so well. I'm going to label this presumptive swing state likely. I'm going to die on this hill, and I know it's crazy, but I wanted to bring you guys a bit more of a bit of a wackier prediction that isn't like the rest. Like you could go through all these. You could just label Nevada, Arizona lean, Georgia lean, North Carolina lean red, Wisconsin tilt blue, and then like Pennsylvania toss up, and like just call it a day. But like that's so boring. Why would you want that? I want variety. So I want to give hot takes. And this hot take that I have is that John Fetterman is going to get the nomination and he's going to destroy the election. Nobody in Pennsylvania is like John Fetterman. John Fetterman is a perfect candidate. He is extremely recognizable. Everybody knows him. Everybody likes him. I would not be surprised if John Fetterman takes the election away with like more than like 10 to 15% of the vote, like actually. And I know that that's a lot, but like you look at him and like you look at all the weak Republicans that are going against him, they aren't strong candidates. But I think John Fetterman is exactly what Pennsylvania needs. Now, Pennsylvania is a bit more socially conservative, so maybe his, like, his trans rights thing won't resonate with a lot of conservative voters. However, you look at, like, I don't know, like, I have a lot of liberal parents, and I have a lot of liberal, like, adults that I'm around, and, like, they all love him, but they don't know what he stands for. And he stands for, well, he calls himself a democratic socialist, but he is pretty far left in terms of America. So, like, it doesn't matter, because politics isn't really that important to a lot of people. They either vote blue or red, or they vote for the person that's more recognizable. And John Fetterman is probably the most recognizable politician in this state. Honestly, like, and, like, for example, I live in a county that was very, like, pretty blue, that flipped very hard to Trump, and voted for him twice. Biden improved the margin a little bit, but, like, still, like, 10% to Republicans. So this state, like, this county, that, like, if the county goes blue, so does the state, because that's how it kind of works. Like, his pro-labor, pro-worker, progressive stance can really do well in Pennsylvania, I think, aside from the social issues like transgender people like myself, or, something or other. So I think it's very unlikely that he loses, even against a very popular incumbent. So that's my hottest take, that John Fetterman is making this state likely in the same way that Ohio is likely. Lastly, we have New Hampshire. So in New Hampshire, I didn't characterize it on Reddit. I did a little Reddit post with a little bit. It was very, very similar to this. And I didn't characterize New Hampshire, and I still don't want to, because New Hampshire is really, really dependent on who runs. For example, you have, like, Maggie Hassan, who is she's okay. I mean, like, she really is nothing special. She hasn't won elections by huge margins. So you look at that, and you're like, well, okay. But then you look at Chris Sununu, who is the Republican governor of the state. Extremely popular. Like, I think John Fetterman type popular. I think you can equate the two pretty well. So you have this guy. If Chris Sununu runs, and I think he said he's looking into it, I don't know if he will, though. If he runs, then this state is likely Republican, because Chris Sununu is extremely popular. He's a more moderate Republican, I believe. Can do very, very, very well. I would not be surprised if he takes the state away by, like, 10-15%, like Fetterman does. So otherwise, I think Maggie Hassan can do fine. I think it would be, like, lean Democrat. So, like, either way, you can have, either one. You have Chris Sununu runs, it's likely Republican. You have Maggie Hassan runs against nobody, and it's lean Democrat. Either way, I don't really like characterizing it, so, we'll have to wait to see who runs. But, as it stands here, we have some states that Democrats are doing very well in. And you look at this map and you're like, wow, Democrats are doing very well. They picked up 2 seats. They picked up 3 seats. They picked up Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. And you're like, okay, well, what does that, why is it so slated towards Democrats? This is because this prediction is what is going on now. And I mean, like, this is the current political climate. That's what I'm going off of. This map is very, very, very likely to turn more red, in one way or another. Whether it be Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, maybe even Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. We'll have to wait and see, because if you look at, like, early 2020 election maps, everything was very tilted towards Republicans, but it changed, and Democrats did much, much better than what was originally expected. So don't take this, don't look at this a few months later in, like, mid-2021 and go, like, how could you ever believe that? And, like, because at that point I'll have more Senate maps out. Obviously don't think, like, oh, well, of course. I'm looking into changing my South Carolina characterization. I might change it to likely. I think that Democrats have a chance here with Joe Cunningham. I'll have to look into him if he runs, and to see how he would do against the incumbent there. But I think he could drive up margins a little bit to make it so it isn't safe. So we'll have to see. But until then, this is my updated Senate prediction, or my early outlook of how things were, say, if like the election was held today. So, of course, things will change. Don't take this out for gospel. Of course, I'm very amateur in what I do. These are just my opinions about the current American political climate. But you know what? Thank you all so much for watching this ASMR video. Happy to get back into it. I just really didn't have a good topic to talk about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, comment. Please tell me what you would like to see, because I am very open to new ideas, of course. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And good night. See you guys later. Sleep well and stay safe.